Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Can you hear me okay? Am I loud enough in the room? I hope so. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. It's very nice. It's refreshing to have a live meeting again and to meet with everybody. I'm Barry Pedersen from the State Board of Education. I coordinate the access test, and I'm going to share some things with you today about access testing in Illinois and from the WIDA Consortium. We don't have all of our access testing results back yet from 2021. We have most of it. Still more is coming. But I'm prepared to share a few observations about the 2021 school year and access testing. But I'll have more to say regarding the larger consortium we belong to, the WIDA Consortium. They shared their own analysis a few weeks ago with state representatives, and I brought some of that to you today. So, but first about Illinois, what we know, some things we know from 2021. We received a file from DRC with some early results from the spring testing. Students who completed the entire test by July and had been scored by DRC. And the results they sent us contained 109,762 records, almost 110,000. That's about half what we did the year before. So participation is down quite a bit. We do still have more records coming, not the other half. We're expecting about another 10%. But the last update I received from DRC, they said they have records for about 124,000, which they think is 64% of what they were expecting to do. From my experience with their estimates in the past, they tend to be a little low. So I think when we finally have everything, we'll have participation in the high 60s, which is down but not terribly different than what other states have seen across the WIDA Consortium. So in grades 1 through 12, we had about 87% test using the online mode. That's becoming a pretty consistent number since we've added the online mode a few years back. In the results we have for 2021 so far, 6.9% of our ELs had proficient scores and are ready to transition to the former EL status. So as I mentioned, we have just some of the spring results. We're going to get the rest of them in November. They're going to send us another file with everything, complete or not, fall, spring. It's all going to be in there, and we'll have a chance to review that for a couple of weeks in November, make some corrections, send those back to DRC, and then they'll prepare final results for us that they will make available in mid-December in WIDA AMS, and they will appear in SIS no later than January 19 of 2022. So a couple of things I have to share about our results. Here we have testing numbers by grade. K through 12. It's a fairly typical pattern except for grades 2 and 3, which are very low, unusually low. So I contacted DRC about that, and the answer is they didn't get enough of the test graded in time, scored in time, to send us the results. They only sent us results for the students that had completed the entire test, and all of it had been scored by DRC.
I'm just going to shut you down for a second. Where's your presentation?
It's I just opened PowerPoint, and
Okay.
it's the first one in the list.
Okay.
Don't need that.
Put you back over.
Okay. Slight technical adjustment. Okay. So as I was saying, we don't have all of the grade 2, 3 scores because of the way, partly because of the way they score the test. Their way of scoring, especially the speaking and the writing portions, which they have to use human scoring for those, is that they get a big batch of scores, not just Illinois, but for the entire consortium, and they score one item at a time instead of going through a single test from front to back. That way they can do better quality control and they can compare scores to each other and make sure it's being done consistently. But apparently they didn't get all the way to the end of that batch. They didn't score all of the items, which means the scoring was not complete and they did not include it in this early results that they sent us. But we will get them in November, and then those bars will be up where they should be, near the grades 1 and 4. Those are the numbers we have so far regarding students who completed the testing in 21. This is a picture of proficiency counts by grade level. And again, 2 and 3 are very low because we didn't get as many of the scores as there are out there. But and we see that the greatest number of students reclassified in grade 4, which is what we've seen since Access 2.0 became our instrument. Grade 5 is a little lower, and then smaller percentages in middle school and in high school. This is a familiar pattern, except for grades 2 and 3. Do these slides make sense? Are there any questions about what these mean?
So that's across Illinois, only 100 people as seniors have passed out of 4.8 or higher? Is that what that means?
Yes, so far, that's what that means. That's how many had a 4.8 or higher. So we're into an unusual season where some of you might be ready to give reports to your families. Others you'll have to wait. It just depends on who you tested, what grades you test. You may have all your results now, and if they're error-free, that's what they will be in the final reports that we get. I know many of you will have to wait until we at least get the November results. But WIDA has a number of score reporting resources they've posted in their public website. They will probably come in handy at some point. These are guides and letters and flyers for the access and the alternate access that are informative and say a lot about the reports. So be sure to make use of them when you're ready. This is a piece of old business, a comparison between access and IAR results for 2019. These are the most recent results available to us at the moment, because of course there was not an IAR test in 2020, and the IAR fall window is still going on even now. It concludes on Friday. But for 2019, in this comparison, we're looking at non-ELs in the blue bar compared to newly proficient ELs in 2019, and all of these students scored at performance levels 4 and 5 on the ELA portion of the IAR. So this is one way of looking at whether or not our newly proficient ELs are ready to make that transition into an English classroom. So that first set of bars are all the students, and the others are by grade levels 3 through 8. And when we look at that first set of bars, they're very similar. They're both right around that 40% mark. 40% of the non-ELs, a little over, reach the levels 4 and 5 in performance, and almost 40% of our newly proficient ELs reach that level. And then we see a very dynamic pattern across the grade levels, where at grade 3, the newly proficient ELs reached those highest 2 performance levels at a much higher rate than non-ELs. The two are very similar in grade 4. Grade 5, our newly proficient ELs are lower than non-ELs. Grade 6, they're more similar again, 7, and then down a little bit in 8. And one thing to keep in mind when you try to interpret what this means is that as our ELs become proficient, they leave the EL population, and their test scores are never seen again in this kind of a comparison. Or if they are, they're in the blue bar. In fact, in this chart, the blue bar contains former ELs. And another way to look at this is to remove them or to treat them as a separate group. There are just different ways to make this comparison depending on the questions you want to ask. But it's an important thing to look at, and I know people are interested in it, and I hope to have some more recent data and some better data. Of course, there are big qualifications on 2021 given the teaching and learning conditions in local schools, lots of remote learning, new tools people had to use, et cetera. But we'll eventually get it and have a look at it. It may tell us something very interesting. So are there any questions about this chart and what it represents? Okay, well, I'll move forward then. I have some information from WIDA. As I mentioned, they shared some data with us the week before last now. And what's on, it may be hard for you to read, but what's on this chart these are frequencies from across most of the consortium. This is not a comprehensive picture. There were still 6 WIDA states still testing at the time they pulled this sample. So a chunk of, including Illinois. So a chunk of it is missing, but it's a pretty good sample that is probably fairly representative of what was happening across the consortium. So they have grade levels across the bottom, grades 1 through 12. Kindergarten is not on here. And then the 3 bars for each grade level are different years, 2019, 2020, and then the green one is 2021. And it's just a comparison of how many students for whom they have test scores in each of those years by grade level. And we can see in the lower grade levels there's quite a bit of a drop in 2021 compared to the other years, at least through grade 5, maybe even grade 6, but actually across the board. Not surprisingly, fewer students participated in access testing in 2021 than in the prior 2 years. And so these are some comments. Here are some comments from WIDA regarding what they saw reflected in that chart. Fewer ELs tested in 2021. Overall, the number of students tested online in 2021 was about 30% lower than previous years. Elementary grades especially had larger portions of missing students compared to other grades. Now, when they look at the demographic composition, according to the demographic variables that they have, of students who took the test and comparing it to previous years, that they did not find any particular student subgroup that was disproportionately represented or missing. But they also cautioned that they have a limited number of demographic variables that they do collect, and one that they do not collect is socioeconomic status. But they shared that with us. And so these are their observations regarding participation in 2021 that they had at the time. In this chart, there is a comparison, again, across grade levels and across years of English learner proficiency as represented by overall scale score, the mean overall scale score by grade and by year. So we have the 3 bars again representing 2019, 2020, and 2021. Each bar has a number in it. You may not be able to read that, but that number is just represents the mean overall scale score with all the domains combined for that grade level at that year. And what we see is that at the lower grade levels, elementary school, up through grade 6, I would say there's a noticeable difference. Those bars are lower than what we can see for grades for 2019 and for 2020. In grades 7 and 8, they're actually very similar. And at grades 9 through 12, again, at grade 9, they're actually higher in 2021. And in 10 through 12, there's not much difference. So as far as overall proficiency by scale score, the higher grades seem to weather 2021 more efficiently than the lower grades. And here are some of WIDA's observations about that. EL proficiency and access as measured by overall composite scale score trended lower for most grades compared to previous years, but EL proficiency was lower in the elementary school grades. Overall proficiency in middle and high school grades changed little from 2019 through 2021. So I find that to be an interesting phenomenon, how resilient our higher grades were. They may not surprise you, but it's something that I think is pretty resilient with this large data set of ELs who all took the same assessment. Next, WIDA did the same thing with the individual domains. And I know those are really small up there. I have bigger ones I'll show you. But I'll go over there, WIDA's comments first, and then we'll compare those to the charts. So proficiency in reading decreased slightly in elementary and middle school, while it increased slightly in the high school. This is reading, and this is what the reading chart looks like. And you can see, again, we have the 3 bars for the 3 years. These are overall scales, well, not overall, these are the reading scale scores for each grade level. And they're a little lower in the elementary school grades, I'd say, through grade 6. But middle school, 7 and 8, they're about the same across the 3 years. In high school, they're actually a little higher in 2021 than in 2019 and 2020. So that's an interesting phenomenon there. For the speaking test, our second dot, proficiency in speaking decreased slightly in elementary and the middle school grades. So I'll go down to reading, speaking. A similar kind of pattern in the lower grades, where 2021 is a little bit below 2019 and 2020, especially 2020. Actually, 2019 and 2021 are pretty similar, or 21 is even higher in some cases than 19. Then when we get to middle school, grades 7 and 8, there's very little difference between them. And even into high school, we don't see very much difference between performance over those 3 years. So that's on the speaking test. So I'll go back to our comments again. Third dot, proficiency in the listening domain decreased in grades 1 through 5 and slightly increased again in grades 6 through 12. So I'll go down to the listening chart. Listening. And we see again in the lower grades that 2021 average scale score is a little lower than the previous 2 years. In middle school, 2021 is similar or a bit higher, and especially in high school, the 2021 scores are a little bit higher than 19 and 20. Okay, then we'll go back and look at writing. The last dot there, in proficiency in writing decreased in all grades, with the larger declines in the lower grades. So reading, speaking, listening, writing. And that's what we see on the chart, is that across all the grades, the writing, the average writing score was lower than in previous years. Pretty close in high school, but still a bit lower. So on this next chart, we have comparisons of growth. So there are only 2 bars. The first bar, the green one, shows growth from 2019 to 2020. The second bar shows growth from 2020 to 2021. So growth for the last 2 years. And let me go to their comments, and then we'll come back to the chart. Their comments are that EL growth as measured in annual overall composite scale score gains decreased compared to growth in the previous year. Scale score growth was about 25% lower compared to the previous year, achieving high growth was specifically difficult for ELs in elementary and middle school grades. Growth in high school grades was similar to the previous year. So that's what we see. The green bar tends to be higher all the way to about grade 9. You'll notice grade 6 looks kind of odd. It's extending below the axis. That means most of the scores in grade 6 were actually lower. The students had lower scores in grade 6 than they did in grade 5. That's what that means. Of course, that's when they make a transition to a new grade cluster and the content is more challenging. But then when we get into high school, the growth is fairly similar. So I hope you find this part interesting and helpful. At some point, we'll have more detail to go. We could go into about Illinois, but again, it'll be qualified by the fact that it's 2021. But I'll go on to one more thing that WIDA shared with us. This is, again, growth. This is by domain. It's not broken out here by grade level, but it compares the overall growth compared to each of the domains. It has all the grade levels combined. So let me read their comments and then come back to the chart. Now, these are WIDA's words. I would not say it this way, but this is how they put it. Since the pandemic began, EL growth was about 24 overall composite scale score points across all grades. And after the pandemic, really, growth in composite scores declined by about 25% down to 18. Okay. The largest relative decline in growth was in the domain of speaking, about 75%, followed by listening and writing at 25%. So what they're talking about, these are scaled score points of gain, the average over all of the grade levels. It was about 24 points from 2019 to 2020, but from 2020 to 21, it was only about 18 points overall with all the domains combined. And then we see across the individual domains, we see the most striking decline in the speaking scores. It's down quite a bit. It's down in the other domains as well, but most dramatically for the speaking domain. Okay, are there any questions anyone has about what WIDA shared with us regarding participation and growth and so forth? Yeah.
I just want to clarify, did you say 6.9% of ELs across Illinois are 4.8 or higher? Is that different from other years?
Yeah, good question. Is the 6.9 proficiency rate we observed so far in the data, is that lower than previous years? And yes, it is. Yes, it is. I believe in 2020, it was more like 7.9, and it was even higher the year before. I think it was around 8.6 in 2019. So it did decline prior to 2021, but it is down for 2021. So far in the data. It may change a little bit. Another comment that WIDA made to us, I think you'll find interesting, is that when using the online scores, they were able to see when the students tested, right? When their test dates were. And they noticed that students who tested later in the year, even into the summer, some of them, had higher scores and more growth than the students who tested earlier. So the instructional time makes a difference. It sure does. And of course, that will have implications for the 2022 assessment. The students who tested later will have less instructional time before they take access again for this current school year. Okay. And we just observations. So next I'll cover a few things coming up for us in Illinois. WIDA updated the English language development standards. They have a 2020 version, excuse me, and which they formally adopted. They're not radically different. The core learning standards are the same, but they've been enhanced with additional features that I'm really not qualified to explain very well. But they've been formally adopted by WIDA, so they are entering into the test development cycle. Item writers are going to be using them to create new items, and those items will be moving through the whole thing. We expect to see items written for the new standards to appear in school year 25. Now, Illinois has not adopted the new standards yet. We're still in the process of doing that. We hope to get it done during 22 or even in 23, and still, so it will give us some time to be ready before that 2025 assessment rolls around. WIDA also introduced a new kindergarten screener. It was earlier in 2021. We have not adopted that yet. We have to change our state rules because the rules right now specifically indicate what the screeners are. So we have to change those to allow the new WIDA screener to be used in Illinois for screening at kindergarten. And that's a process. It goes before the board, it goes to another agency, comes back to the board, it takes several months. But we expect to have that done by later in the spring of school year 22. Hopefully in time for the kindergarten roundup. Then the last thing is alternate access proficiency criteria. We've been talking about this for a few years. We think we know what we want it to look like now, so we were in the process of implementing that. We're not ready to announce officially what it is. I'll tell you what we hope it will be. It's, we think we want it to be an overall score of P2 on the alternate access, along with the agreement of the local IEP team that the student is ready to transition out of EL status. So that'll be kind of a first of its kind as far as EL criteria or any kind of performance criteria by the state is having soliciting that local input, whether or not to promote a student. So that's a process too. Not necessarily getting it into state rules. We do have to have the approval of the state superintendent, and then we have to add it to our ESSA plan, our accountability plan. So we'll be sending them amendments in February, most likely. And once they come back, if everything looks good, then we'll have to modify our student information system to recognize that P2 score, but at the same time, allow input from the local district to confirm that proficiency by local agreement before it becomes official. So we're breaking new ground. This is new territory for them, but we'll do it. I think we'll get that done sometime this year. Will we be able to apply it to the 2021 scores? I can't think of a reason we shouldn't, but we're still going through the process. There may be obstacles it runs into. I think we would only postpone that if there are delays of some kind. But we'll just have to see how that process plays out. But if we do not apply it to 2021, I'm pretty certain they'll be ready for the 2022. They'll be ready for 2023. Okay. A couple of things I'd like to mention about communications and staying up to date on the developments in the world of access. We have a communications page for the state board that applies to all of the state assessments. And that's sort of a picture of it there on the right. We have something called ISBE assessment updates, which for a long time we called it the listserv. You can still find listserv language on our web pages. It's simply a weekly email from ISBE providing updates and information about all of the state tests. That's a good way to get regular information, not just about access, but all of the other state tests as well. Then on some Fridays during the school year, we have live webinars. Some of those are announced. There's also an archive of past webinars with recordings and the slides that we used, but that's another way to get up-to-date information about what's happening with state assessments. And then there's WIDA's Monday Mail, which comes straight from WIDA. It doesn't go through ISBE. And I think most people are getting that. Are most of you getting that now, the WIDA Monday Mail? I think you're signed up automatically when you get an account on the secure portal. But if you're not getting it, you can request that your district your district coordinator, the person with a district level account in the secure portal, add the assessment package to your account, and then you should start getting them. Packages are a new thing this year because they revamped, I'm sure you know, they revamped the secure portal. Looks different, functions a little differently. So they have packages now. And the assessment package is the one that triggers the Monday mail from WIDA. Another thing about WIDA, they need help from us. They need help from educators, EL educators every year, to go through various phases of the test development process. They have to invite people to participate. They have a big consortium, but we would like some of our people to participate in all of these events. Things like a bias and sensitivity review, content review, maybe classroom observations, surveys, panels, field testing. These are all things that become available from time to time, and educators can participate. So if you're interested, or if you have people who are interested, you can visit the Building a WIDA Assessment website and to learn more about it and to apply for participation. Okay? Then on this, this is my last slide of content. This is just resources and contacts for WIDA, for DRC, and for ISBE, the websites, the emails, the phone numbers. So feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions about access testing. And with that, are there any questions I can answer for you? Yeah. Right. The timeline to get the rest of our data. It's coming on, it's going to be posted in SIS on November 6th. We're actually getting it a few days before. But SIS has to be careful with this one because we already have some of it in our system and we've made corrections, and we don't want to undo our corrections when we bring in the new. So, but we will get it a few days before the 6th, and then it will appear Monday, November 6th, and it'll be there. Well, we won't take it down, but we need to use the next 2 weeks to make additional corrections that we want to communicate to DRC, things like students who are unidentified, students who have duplicate scores, scores that need to be merged. Maybe there's a grade level question about it. We need to correct those kinds of things so that DRC can give us our final results. They'll post those in December and then send them out on paper January 6th. That's our timeline for 2021. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I think I understand your question about we have to send them our pre-ID file, and they use that to populate WIDA AMS with all of our ELs. So will we be able to pull out our proficient ELs before we send that to them? That's the question. I believe we will. I believe we will. So we will have a window there. I forget the exact day. I want to say the 4th. We're going to get the file on the 4th. And even though we're closing down pre-ID changes on the 6th, we don't actually send that file to them until the following Monday. So there's some time in there for our SIS people to remove the kids who have proficient scores in the new file. If you happen to see some, though, in WIDA AMS who were proficient, you don't have to test them. You can just leave those records alone, and it will be corrected in the next iteration, the next transition. When they send results to us, we'll indicate that we'll know that they shouldn't have tested because their EL status will be different. Yeah. It's a tricky year because our last year's calendar is overlapping with this year's calendar. I'm trying to keep it all straight and make sure it works smoothly. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you said late
Of the current school year, yeah, we're expecting to be able to use the new kindergarten screener by late spring of this school year.
So are you still able to use the old K model until that time? Like we do,
Yeah.
a lot of times people pre-screen or screen early,
Mhm.
early childhood prior to the end of the school year.
Yeah, we'll continue using model through the end of this school year. We haven't actually decided when we want to stop doing that, if we want to stop doing that. It's a conversation we haven't had yet, but yeah, you're free to use model through the end of the current school year.
And Barry, is the new kindergarten screener like paper or pencil again and individually assessed, or is it a different format?
Okay, the question is, will it be a paper and pencil test, or is it? Yes, it is. The new screener is strictly paper and pencil. And you'll have the option of either downloading the pieces and creating your own kits at no cost, or if you prefer, you can order the pre-printed ones from the WIDA store and get them ready to go. Yeah. Anything else? No one? Okay, well, I'll hang around. If anyone has questions, feel free to come up and speak with me. Thank you for coming today.